The retirement planning landscape is experiencing seismic shifts, and you all likely recognize that. We released a white paper here recently at the same title of this webinar to give you some context to know why this shift is happening.
Yeah. If you were to define financial literacy, it could be a couple things. Number one is just basically teaching the skills to make really good financial decisions, building good habits, and then just handling money better and more wisely.
Some have either probably started their retirement journey or have thought about it, and prior to now. So seeing the higher interest rate environment has really led to higher annuity sales. And for us, it's generally kind of comes down to either accumulation and safety or income. And our income sales are definitely skyrocketing right now because people are looking to generate more guaranteed lifetime income.
Welcome to the Retirement Planning Mind Shift. I'm joined here by my colleagues John Summers and Steve Rohrig. Gents, thanks for joining me. So why are we here? The retirement planning landscape is experiencing seismic shifts, and you all likely recognize that as you join this webinar today. We released a white paper here recently at the same title of this webinar to give you some context to know why this shift is happening.
Yeah.
And today we're going to dig into some of the solutions that are available through SMS. But before we do that, we're going to dive into all the opportunities that advisors have to help their clients be well positioned in retirement. But before we can launch into those opportunities, we're going to go through a baseline understanding of these topics. So let's jump right in, Steve. Can you define financial literacy and why it's so important?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. So I think as an industry, Chris, we would love for everyone to achieve financial security. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. I think a root cause could be just financial literacy in general. So if you were to define financial literacy, it could be a couple things. Number one is just basically teaching the skills to make really good financial decisions, building good habits, and then just handling money better and more wisely. In terms of topics, it could be budgeting, it could be savings, investing, insurance, maybe even credit and debt management. And then further down the road could include taxes, Medicare, Social Security, and then even how do you handle longevity and living a long time. So a lot goes into it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about empowerment through education, right? Because I think that's one of the biggest and most rewarding things that we do often is educate on those topics. We joke that you don't just turn 60 or 65 and enroll in Social Security or Medicare school, right? I mean, you don't really know when and where you're going to learn some of these things along the way, and you may not have the opportunity to learn them right before they matter, right, at or near retirement.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important for us to continue to try to provide these opportunities for learning and education. And we see that right now, right? We do that on a day-to-day basis with our agents and advisors, try to help them with the right content and materials to be able to educate their client base. And that's one of the most popular topics right now that we do send out on maybe a mass send to get financial literacy, just basic financial terms, investing opportunities. Those are definitely one of the most sought after pieces of information that we send.
Yeah. And we're empathetic, John. We do this every day, right? So we're immersed in this content and the terminology. Right now I've got my kids are young adults, so I'm trying to be a resource for them. And it's not easy. There's a lot of things that we just take for granted every day. And they're not learning this at the colleges, universities, high schools. This isn't part of their curriculum. So it really is incumbent on that advisor or that agent to really step up and be that resource for their clients. But there's also opportunities, I think, too.
I think there are. I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think a lot of our top advisors are either doing educational workshops. Mm-hmm. We see financial wellness programs through employer groups being one of the more popular opportunities to educate their employees as well on financial literacy. I think you also see different mediums now, right? With social media, I'm starting to see more and more people on social media trying to promote different types of financial literacy opportunities. So, hopefully we can continue to educate people the right way so they make good decisions at or near retirement, but also all along their financial journey.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's safe to say our top advisors, producers out there are those that educate their clients and really help them understand what they're going through in retirement. So, Steve, how can agents and advisors help their clients navigate income and longevity in retirement?
Yeah, a great question, Chris. So I think one of the things that we all agree on is no one knows how long they're going to live, right? So that uncertainty can be a challenge when it comes to income planning and retirement, but also then the opportunity to provide solution, right? So, making sure that your clients have guaranteed lifelong income that will last as long as they do. But also too, in terms of the landscape in general, we're seeing, less employers offer pension plans for their employees. So then it really leaves just Social Security and savings such as a 401k to generate that income. So, I'll focus on Social Security maybe as a start. We view that as the foundation of the income plan. Social Security is a very dear program for many people. Millions of people receive benefits, and for many seniors, it's their only source of guaranteed lifelong income. But what we found though is that maybe some people don't fully maximize what they could be receiving from Social Security. And if you look at this chart here, this is from the Social Security statement, right off that page, showing the various claiming ages and how much they would receive at those ages. But those numbers add up over time. And people could be leaving, benefits on the table in terms of future income and whatnot. So we just want people to make the best decisions for them, but make it in a deliberate and on design program. So, and what we found too is that providing education relative to Social Security, does lead to other areas of planning as well. Opens up that doors. So.
Yeah, I look at that chart, Steve, and I mean, the amount of monthly benefit paid out at 70 is dramatically different than 62.
It is, yeah.
But I think the missing factor and the key ingredient is, well, if you told me the day you're going to die, this gets really easy. We don't know, right? So the unknowns are what cause us to make maybe a rash decision. But the difference between a good and a poor, if you knew the final decision on age, could be $100,000 or more just by looking at those numbers over time. So it's a significant decision. And again, I think a lot of people, we've been talking about it for 10, 15 plus years, trying to educate people on Social Security, but they're going to seek out the information when they're ready.
Yeah.
So there's constantly people coming in still wanting to know about Social Security, regardless of the information that's already been put out. So it's a really interesting topic. And you mentioned earlier, Social Security is definitely a single source for many, their only source of guaranteed income. And that's because they may not have the opportunity to participate in a pension through their employer. But the other way to potentially buy guaranteed income is through the purchase of an annuity. And we've definitely seen annuity sales, I'd say, skyrocket over the last decade, and even more so recently. A big part of that is the current environment. The interest rate environment is at a very unique place now. It was at a very low interest rate environment for many, many years. In fact, we haven't seen rates as high as they are now since about 2008.
Yep.
So for many, that's quite a long time. Some have either probably started their retirement journey or have thought about it, prior to now. So seeing the higher interest rate environment has really led to higher annuity sales. And for us, it's generally kind of comes down to either accumulation in safety or income. And our income sales are definitely skyrocketing right now because people are looking to generate more guaranteed lifetime income.
And now is a good time. I agree. So, yeah.
Steve, one of the things mentioned in the white paper is the Social Security shortfall, right? And although I believe no politician wants to be the one that cuts Social Security, it's a big deal, and people are very concerned.
Oh, very much so. I'm glad we're kind of revisiting Social Security as well. But yeah, it is a big concern, and you are hearing more and more about it. But let's get back to the cause, right? Demographic shifts. Right now, we've got that worker to retiree ratio is getting smaller. Right now, it's less than 3 to 1. So for every 3 workers to fund 1 retiree, really puts a lot of strain and pressure on the system itself. And I think moving forward, there may be some pretty serious financial headwinds. And the deal is, without congressional action, then really we could be seeing benefit cuts, in terms of the monthly benefits as high as maybe 20-25% here by 2035. So I'm confident that Congress will come up with a solution that really helps everybody and make sure they get the income they deserve. But also too, even if action is no taken, people understand that it is funded through payroll tax. So there will be Social Security for everyone down the road. It just may be a different form or fashion, but something to definitely keep an eye on.
And Steve, earlier you mentioned the 401k as a vehicle that most Americans are contributing to. So how has today's retirement landscape changed over the years? And we're starting to see the employees take a lot more responsibility on planning for retirement.
Yeah, it truly is on their own. I mentioned earlier, over the last 40 years, that shift, in benefits too. So the number of private sector employer-sponsored plans in terms of the pension world, has declined. I think we're all aware of that. But at the same time, the growth of 401ks has exploded. It's pretty much, a lot of employers do offer these benefits. We do have a chart here, Chris, to kind of share with you, what's going on, and the fact that people are on their own to take, to leverage these benefits, the employer match, to really put them in a position to prepare and save for retirement. But it also creates a need for investment advice, both before and after retirement. So as you can see here, $25 trillion, that's trillion with a T, of dollars that are in these accounts. And so it really requires a lot of attention from our advisors and the agents that work with these clients to help them make good choices. So.
Yeah. I mean, I just look at that, Steve, and one of the things I noticed, obviously, it's grown pretty consistently.
Yeah,
you can tell by that. That's a big number, right?
Yep.
And I think it kind of goes all the way back to financial literacy, where we started. A lot of people are investing in these long-term retirement accounts, tax-deferred retirement accounts. They get at or near retirement, and they say, look, I did a great job. Look how much I've saved. Mm-hmm. But what they don't realize is, well, what about the taxable nature of those assets, right? Because they might have oversaved perhaps in tax-deferred accounts or put the majority of their wealth there for retirement. So now they're trying to figure out, well, what's next, right?
Yeah.
So navigating, not only we talk about asset allocation when you're maybe younger or accumulating, at retirement we talk a lot about tax location.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
And you guys know this term, and I'm sure many people on this call do, the term retirement tax bomb.
Yeah.
So that we're facing. What does that mean, Steve?
Yeah, so we actually did a white paper on this a couple of years ago, Chris, and just think about that number we saw earlier, $25 trillion or more, either in IRAs or defined contribution plans, and much of these dollars have never been taxed. And so what that means is when those dollars come out, either to the account holder and or their beneficiary, that is a fully taxable transaction. And so what happens then is really I see two outcomes. Either one is the account holder or the beneficiary has no idea that that's going to happen, and or they do know about it but haven't factored that into their planning. So I think it just creates opportunity to talk about taxes and to really maybe get in that area of planning. So, yeah.
I think some people don't think there's anything you can do about it. I think that's part of the thing that as an advisor, we can really help a lot of people understand you do have some control or some things that we can do from a planning perspective. And Steve, I've heard you say it a few times, and I love it. But you say the tax code is written in pencil.
It is, yeah.
And when you think through that, just over the last 10-ish years, how many changes there have been, regulatory changes that have impacted taxes, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, both implemented and now might be, phasing out going into a year or two. Yeah. There's going to be some potential estate tax changes. Yeah. So there's just a lot of reason as an advisor, just by paying attention and staying aware of what's going on, there's opportunities and planning opportunities for your clients, but also new clients. And this is exactly what we talk about when we talk about empowerment through education. This is what we're educating on, right? The changes, how that's going to impact you. Some people, it's as simple as they move or relocate in retirement, and there might be state changes they need to take into consideration into a territory that they're not used to being in. So, there's just a lot of opportunities, I think, to either network with or partner as an advisor with other folks that have those areas of expertise.
Yeah, exactly. And Secure Act is another example. Mm-hmm. We can adjust our plans to the reduced, time frames there. And then also, too, you mentioned the workshops, but also insurance products in general, whether it's long-term care, life insurance, annuities in certain cases, are very tax efficient under today's tax code. So,
Great point.
Yeah.
And Steve, you mentioned earlier the term demographic shift, and Frank Maselli, an industry expert, has talked about that this is an evolutionary moment in our industry. What does he mean by that? And then how long will this shift go on?
Yeah. So, great question. I think the important thing to understand is that demographics have tremendous influence, really over our global economy. But more specifically within our industry, over the next 20 or 30 years, this is already happening too, is this demographic shift. And I'll touch on four specific things today. So the first one is, peak 65. So this is the first year, this is the peak of the boomers turning 65. So think about all those people that are aging into Medicare and rollover choices and just aging into retirement. Well, that trend is going to continue for 4 more years. So we have this large number of people, entering that next phase of life where they need help. They need that guide and that person to help them along. And then also too, if you look at this chart, they got the wealth by generations, and looking at just personal wealth in general, over half the wealth in the United States is controlled by the boomers. And what's going to happen is a couple of things. We're going to see, a rise of women because women tend to outlive their spouse, but also too, maybe they've already inherited money or assets from mom and dad. So we call them double inheritors. So of the orange section here, boomer women are going to be a major force to serve and to make sure that we realize that. And then finally, you look at the next pie is the Generation X, about a quarter of the wealth, which then leads to that next phase of wealth transfer. And I think you're going to see the importance of estate planning and legacy planning being weaved into the discussion, workshops and things of that nature, networking with attorneys and whatnot, making sure we've got the plans in place. And then finally, just next gen planning in general. From what I've seen is a lot of this wealth could skip Gen X, not saying all of it will, but millennials are going to be next in line to inherit all this money, and they're going to be not only in terms of numbers, but also in terms of economic power as well. So great chance to serve them. Yeah.
So you talk a lot about the demographic shifts
Yeah.
for clients or our prospects or who we're taking care of as financial advisors. What about for the advisors themselves?
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I think we've seen a big shift, right? So we've helped a lot of our top advisors figure out their succession plan, whether it's junior advisor, whether it's trying to make sure their clients are taken care of if they themselves decided to retire. It's funny, you talk to a lot of advisors that help so many people with retirement, then they put off their own retirement because they're too busy working, right? So it's different for everybody. But I think what's really fun for us is trying to help make sure we can help them help as many people as possible, but then help our advisors figure out how they're going to transition their business as they decide to either retire or figure out what their next phase would be. Yeah.
And at every industry conference we go to or one that we hold, isn't that a big topic of conversation around? Not necessarily on the main stage, but advisors talking to advisors. What's your succession plan? What are you going to do to monetize your business? Yeah. So we talked about longevity a lot, and then this aging society. Yeah. And another factor impacting this retirement crisis is healthcare, the number one concern that people have going into retirement. Yeah. So why does this matter then so much in that income plan, Steve?
Yeah, well, the good news is people are living longer, Chris, and but the bad news is, as a result, their exposure to healthcare needs goes up, and those needs come at a cost, and those costs really add up over time, and really need to be factored into the income plan to make sure we've got enough dollars set aside to pay for those costs, and then. The next step is long-term care. Experiencing an extended care event can really devastate that plan. If the protection isn't there to pay for it. And going back to literacy, a lot of people think Medicare and Medicaid, come to the plate and pay for these services. They do, but it's very limited in scope and in terms of what they do cover. And then, there's the caregiver shortage in general. Going back to demographics, how are we going to serve this growing retiree base? And then also too, just at the local level. There's a few states out there that are really scrambling right now, to shore up their budgets and to look at how they can provide, the services that their residents may need within their state. So they're looking at that through a pretty healthy lens too. So a lot going on with healthcare.
A lot going on with healthcare, Steve, but that's really our wheelhouse too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we've been doing for years is health and wealth. It's really helping people understand two major decisions that are near retirement, their healthcare costs and their income. Yeah. I think if they're really confident that their income can cover their lifestyle needs, they're not going to have any major healthcare costs that are unexpected, that they feel confident in retirement. And when you look at just healthcare, I think it's interesting. One of the most important topics we talk about empowerment through education. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not only how Medicare does work, it's also what it doesn't cover. Yeah. And having those conversations. We're seeing a big rise in ancillary products, right? Other products that might supplement Medicare or their Medicare solution, whether it be an Advantage or supplement plan. Yeah. So it's really interesting to see how that's kind of picked up. And I think that's going to continue as more and more people are asking those questions. What does Medicare do? What doesn't it do? What expenses can I count on? And which ones might be variable? Because we're trying to get to fixed income, which means you need to control expenses. Yeah. So that's really keen for us for health and wealth. That's a big part of what we do at Senior Market Sales.
Yeah. Good point.
And guys, we mentioned Frank Maselli earlier, and he said the implications for insurance and financial professionals will be unprecedented through this. And through all of our research at SMS, we found that the advisors and agents that thrive through this are going to change their thinking in 3 ways.
Okay.
One, they're going to revise their traditional retirement plan and paradigm shift, right? 2, they're going to reimagine your role and then the products and scope of the services that they offer. And 3, they're going to recalibrate their business to the next generation of customers. And so when you think of that planning model of the future and being that centerpiece, John, do they need to know everything? Do they need to be the master of all? Or what is their role?
Yeah, it's a funny question, right? Because I think a lot of advisors, but also consumers, expect us to be able to do more, but I don't think they expect you to have to do it all. I think they're expecting your business to be able to solve more questions or more problems they might have. And I think that's the key, right? It's done through partnership. It doesn't have to be done on your own. But I think if a client could come to you with the confidence that you know the answer to other questions they might have along the way in retirement, they'd be more keen to work with you than to have to go find someone else that they may not know. Yeah. So, no, they don't necessarily have to know it all, but I think the better they can connect their consumer to the end solutions makes sense, and we're definitely seeing a shift more towards a well-rounded planning approach instead of just someone who can come and take care of my assets, right? They want more support than just maybe one thing.
And there's a pathway to this, isn't there?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I think this is what's so fun right now, and what really got us going on this, this webinar, but also this white paper and some of the ongoing conversation. We talk about the next era and maybe the new way of thinking. A big part of it is why. Why now? And I think we know there's a lot of people that are at or near retirement. We're trying to help the whole baby boomer generation understand some of these complexities, but there's a lot of things changing. Regulatory updates are coming through more and more. If you want to call them an update, you could call it, like you said earlier, a seismic shift there, right? So there's a lot of changes occurring. There's also a lot of changes with the demographics of not only our consumers, our financial advisors. So there's a lot of things that are in flux. So what we've tried to do is identify a number of different ways that you can go down to be growing or expanding your business or to be offering more services to your clients. So as you can see, a few of those, like we talked about earlier, focusing on financial literacy. In some ways, this might be adding or diversifying something that you're not doing today or not doing systematically on purpose by design. Maybe it's an accident, right? So if you're partnering with a CPA or partnering with an attorney, maybe you've done it for a few of your clients, but you haven't done it with everybody and really turn it into a process. And so a big part of what we're talking about here are the opportunities that we've identified to help you grow and change your business to stay up with the ever-changing tides that we're facing.
And I think it'd be really hard if you're an advisor on your own to tackle this by yourself. I think this is kind of where SMS can really come to the plate and help. So,
yeah, and there's so much within each one of those pathways, right? And that, when I mentioned earlier, we're going to have multiple sessions on these pathways to be able to really dig in and deep dive on how an advisor can help their clients navigate through that retirement puzzle. So, our SMS producer platform, John, is the ultimate in the industry and can help people not only navigate those pathways, but in other areas of their practice as well.
Yeah, a moment ago I said something. I said on purpose by design, and I love that phrase just because this is kind of how we've built out our health and wealth platform, right? It's really been able to help some of our advisors or our agents focus on one or two solutions, and they're really good at it, and we're trying to help them scale and grow their business. But many now are really trying to diversify and offer more solutions to their clients. And so this is what we've done and try to do really, really well by diversifying our offerings. So whether it's marketing support, whether it's finding the right partners that you can trust to work with to be able to bring those additional solutions to your clients, this is exactly what we do day in and day out. And our 50-plus marketers are very well adapted to be able to go through this with our top clients, but also our clients that are trying to grow and expand their business. And like I mentioned earlier, some might be trying to scale down or build into a succession plan. And we've been having those conversations more and more as well.
The premier health and wealth platform in the industry. Thanks, John. Thanks, Steve. So don't forget to fill out the survey at the end of the webinar, so you can give feedback on the webinar, ask additional questions, and I mentioned the subsequent sessions that we'll have, and on these 7 paths. But if you don't want to wait until these sessions, go ahead and put that in the survey in the open box, and we will definitely follow up with you here soon. So, John, Steve, thanks again for joining me. Great content. And everyone, thank you very much for being on the webinar today. And we look forward to speaking with you soon.